Hello and welcome to the Hacks to Knits channel. My name is Deanna. I'm a master knitter living in Okinawa, Japan. And this week for my Life in Okinawa segment, I'm taking you to a Buddhist temple and a Shinto cave shrine that has a very interesting history involving a monk battling a giant snake. That's over in the town of Kin, and I'll get to that near the end of the episode. Fall is in the air, so I thought this week would be a good week to break out all of my favorite hat patterns. I've also got some real progress to finally share with you as far as my whips go, and a new cast on. Let's get started. So like I said at the beginning, it is now fall. Fall is a time of year when I finally start busting out all of my hats. Or at least I would be if I was living in a colder environment. But I do miss all of the favorite hat patterns, and I thought this would be a good time of year to share with you some of my favorites. I, of course, am always going to be showing you a whole mixture of patterns. So this isn't going to be just like the top 2 that are on Instagram this week, or the ones that are brand new and sparkly that every channel is showing you. I like to deep dive into my favorites in the way back because there's tons of great patterns out there, and sometimes we forget about them because, there's something new and sparkly on the horizon. So first up this week, this is my number 10. It's funny, I picked my favorite first. I should do these backwards. But number 10 this week is the Crofters cap. This pattern is beautiful, beautiful. If you don't know, this was the official pattern of the 2021 Shetland Wool Week. Shetland Wool Week is a recurring event that highlights all of the knitting from the Shetland Isles and the wool and the fiber producers from that area. And this pattern is free, which is excellent. I know I've talked many times on this channel about the differences between stranded color work versus ferrule color work versus other styles of stranded color work. And it's nice to be able to show you a piece of knitting that you can very comfortably say, yes, this is ferrule style color work. I especially love, so I'm looking over at the pattern page and hopefully you're looking at it too. This pattern is by Wilma Malcolmson, and I have so many pictures up from the project page. Their samples have been knit in just about every color combination, and I especially love the sort of purpley blue colorway. That project does an excellent job of displaying the traditional transitions of color in ferrule color work, and this is definitely something that I have been itching to cast on for a long time now. Did I mention it was a free Ravelry download? It's a free Ravelry download. Go get it. Next up, number 9. This is 9. Number 9. All right, next up is number 9. This is an Andrea Mowry power iron. It is a little bit newer, so this came out last fall in the October 2020 timeframe. It's the Old Port hat. And what I love about this hat, so it's 2-color brioche with just a little bit of shaping, and she definitely snuck in a little detail by adding an internal layer like a liner that you can knit with a really nice, soft, snuggly, warm against the skin yarn. This is an excellent idea, especially if you live in a very, very cold climate, because a lot of the yarns that are really good for color work or really good for brioche are those yarns that are a little bit grippier, a little bit more rustic, and sometimes those can be pretty itchy when they're up against the sensitive skin of your neck or your ears or forehead. And so having an extra liner knit in something that's just snuggly, I want cashmere, right? Cashmere is what my go-to for a non-itchy snuggly wool snuggly yarn. This hat pattern has it all knit in, and something I also really like about it is the way the brioche is shaped over the ears. It gives this subtle nod that reminds me of the ear flap hats, like the traditional winter ear flap hats where you could fold them up and like button them up if you didn't want them down over your ears. There's something about the shaping of this hat right here that reminds me of those ear flap hats and just makes me really happy. I've actually owned a couple of vintage World War II ear flap style caps that I wore and loved immensely when I was living up in North Dakota. This one, I think I'm going to cast it on. I really love the colors in the yarn that Andrea used on this too. So it may be very soon coming into my cast on repertoire. All right, for number 8. This hat is the Vertizontal Slouchy. That's hard to say. I actually knit a pair of socks that were called, I think they were called Vertizontal also. That's neither here nor there. We'll get back to that. I mentioned that during my favorite socks video, which I'll link above for you. But this is the Vertizontal Slouchy, and what I love about this hat is that it's simple. So for me, I think all of you know this by now, I either like pretty simple plain stuff because that's what I like to wear, or like really crazy over the top stuff because that's what I like to knit. You know, the things that keep you interested while knitting. This one is definitely one of those simpler patterns. I love, love, love that it has a huge folded up brim knit and garter stitch. That garter stitch is really gonna like hug your head and like just make it feel really warm and cozy, while the stockinette stitch just gives it that nice kind of slouch and will let it lie on your head in a really comfortable way. Guys, can you tell me, is it true? I heard garter stitch got its name because originally it was the stitching that was done at the top of stockings to help them stay up. So imagine you're knitting garter stitch sideways, and you can see how stretchy that gets. So that little sort of sideways thin band of garter stitch would be the top of the stocking, and then presumably you would pick up and knit down or up. Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. You guys let me know if you know that answer, but I think the history of the term garter stitch is because it was the stitch used to hold stockings up at the top of your legs. This pattern is a free Ravelry download, and it is done by Laura Jones. All right, coming in at number 7 this week. This pattern is a little bit more advanced than some of the other patterns I've talked to you about. This is the Ultimate Twined Hat. It is available for purchase through Ravelry. It's by McKissock. And it is a wonderful representation of twined knitting. If twined knitting is not something you've done before, let me just very briefly explain it to you. So similar to stranded color work, it's typically done with 2 colors carried all the way around the row, but there are some very distinct differences. The first being that every single stitch is interlocked. So imagine if you are used to doing stranded color work and you have a long float, you might catch a stitch every now and then to sort of shorten the floats. It's not caught the same way, but typically between every single stitch you will just twist the yarns over each other in order to keep everything locked in really tight. It really does make a dense, firm fabric. But one of the other distinguishing features of this style of knitting is that you use the floats to create some of the pattern on the front of the work. So if you're looking at the picture of this hat, you can see that sort of XO pattern. So those dark X's there, the float is actually pulled to the front of the work in a stitches knit and then pulled to the back, and so that will create those lines. And it's very similar looking to mosaic stitch, I find, but it is definitely not mosaic stitch. It's probably closer to the stranded color work than it is to the slip stitching of mosaic stitch. I had the opportunity to take a class on this when I was at a knitting festival in Connecticut. Oh gosh, many years ago now, I think 4 or 5 years ago. And that's funny, I have it right in front of me. I produced this little guy here. And I produced this little guy here, which is just a little teeny tiny mitten. This incorporates what they call the Latvian braid, and you can definitely see some of these patterns here. Let me see if I can zoom in on this for you. Now this pattern does come with a warning that says that it's probably not for the very beginners or people who are very beginner to the twined knitting style. I think if you are a very experienced knitter and have at least a little bit experience in the twine knitting, you can probably make your way through it, but might be a little bit challenging for a newer knitter. Number 6. So this hat is by Toshiyuki Shimada, and it isn't available as a Ravelry download. It was published in a Japanese language book called The Northern European Knit Accessories. I hesitated to put this one on because it is printed in a Japanese language magazine, and that magazine is out of print. So this is difficult for me, but this is called the Page 40 Binge hat. I'm honestly thinking I might just try to recreate it from looking at the picture or create something similar to it. This pattern is a stocking cap sort of shape, so it's got a long sort of slouchy shape to it that tapers at the end, and it has a nice big folded over brim. And it does feature color work, but this is definitely a good example of what is not Fair Isle color work. So this is a stranded color work piece, and how you can tell right away is sort of the high contrast and cleanliness of the colors in this. Typically a Fair Isle piece will have a lot of blending and transitioning and shifting of colors, whereas this piece is very stark, like stark white, clean yellow sections or orange sections in this case. But it is a really pretty, stunning hat. I like it a lot. It's on my list of to-dos. I really do. I think I'm going to just kind of look at it and try to hack it, try to make my own version of it. I think the most challenging part will probably be the larger motif that is around the brim, because it looks like, I'm not exactly sure what it's supposed to be. It kind of looks a little bit like flowers maybe, or thistles or something along those lines. And then the rest of it should be pretty straightforward. It's checkers and some pretty standard shaping. Number 5, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I put this on my list. This is the cutest little kid hat I've ever seen in my life. It's called the Chullo cap, and it's by Mags Kandis. And the little boy wearing this is just absolutely adorable. So this hat is a sort of a nod to the Andean style Chullo caps, which are typically worn by males in the Andean regions, in the Andean cultures. This one it's actually so cute. It's got this little pointy cap, and it's got ridges and texture and color work. I actually really like it. It is sort of a fun, more accessible nod to this style of knitting. And I did do a video on Andean style knitting, which I will link up above for you. If you've never seen a Chullo cap, they're typically knit by men, and they are actually knit quite a bit tighter than what Western fashion would consider a well-fitting hat. They wear sort of high on the head and very, very tight. But they typically feature lots of bright colors, densely knit, so like a really tight gauge, and often feature bits of crochet embellishment and like baubles and things along the edges, which are really stunning. Those are not present on this pattern, but I think it would be pretty easy to add them in. Coming in at number 4, this is the Langfield hat, and this is a hat that I knit quite a while ago. It's been in my favorites forever. It features garter stitch and a unique construction that really shows off color change as well. I would recommend using a hand spun yarn. I think this would be an excellent project for hand spun yarn, or a yarn that has sort of longer color transitions. So not variegated. Variegated yarn would look nice, but I think to really show it off, you want to see either a self-striping or an ombre or something like that. And that's because you knit this pattern sort of in pieces and graft them together, and that really makes it visually interesting to look at, because those color sections, you'll have some going this way and some going this way, and it makes it for a very visually interesting hat. The pattern is very good at teaching you how to adjust the size of the hat too, so it's basically not a one size fits all, but like the pattern is written so that you follow it and adjust accordingly for your particular size or shape that you're looking for. I knit one of these for my mom many, many years ago. I was still a pretty new knitter. I still think that this is a very beginner-friendly pattern, and it is available for purchase on Ravelry, and it comes in a couple of different languages. I think it's available in English, German, and Russian. So if that is a pattern you like, I would definitely recommend go checking that one out. This is by Martina Behm. Number 3 is a hat that I have not personally knit, but has been in my favorites forever. One of these days, I will get around to it. This was published in the Shibui. Is that how you say it? Shibui? Shibui. Okay. This was published. It's available on Ravelry is what I'm saying here, and it's called Pebble Peak hat. It's by Susan Lorenz, and what's interesting about this hat is this little sort of thing on the back of the head. It's a thing. I don't know what to call it. It's basically a little kind of self-sealing loop on the back of the hat that makes it visually interesting. It's got some very simple sort of lace or patterning around the brim, and I think this is a beautiful hat for a sort of solid color, neutrals, maybe some semi-solid or tonals, but I think you would lose a lot of what's beautiful about this hat if you added in variegated yarn or striped yarn or very busy color work yarn. I do think it would be really cute, just like straight neon yellow, like super bright and fun. I think would be also really, really cute on this pattern. It is a light fingering weight yarn, and honestly, it probably would look pretty good with a little bit of mohair held along with it. We're getting towards the end, guys. We are. Number 2 on my list. This one really shows off a little bit of my nerdy side. So I am a huge fan of sci-fi, and I very distinctly remember sitting in the movie theater watching the Star Trek movie that came out back in 2009. And in this movie, Scotty is wearing this knit hat that looks so warm and cozy and scrumptious, and it's textured. And I remember distinctly spending about half the movie kind of like leaning in, trying to see if I could figure out what was going on with this hat because I liked it so much. And somebody did all the work for me. So this is called Scotty's Hat by Nicole Lorenz. It is a free Ravelry download, and they show it in a couple of different versions, a sort of longer and shorter version. I definitely like the shorter version. But for you Star Trek nerds out there, maybe you remember seeing this hat too. It is an excellent way to, geek out your nerd self or just enjoy a really cozy hat pattern. All right, I have one more on my list, and then I actually have 2 like kind of honorable mentions. They're crochet patterns. You guys know I don't really crochet, so we'll just tack those on in the end really quick, and I'll try not to talk too much about them because I think you'll really see that I don't have that much crochet knowledge. But number 1 on my list, viewers of my channel, this will be no surprise. This is the Luminosity hat, and this is by Tanis Lavelle of Tanis Fiber Arts. I talk about this company and this designer all the time because really my favorite. Yeah, it's probably my favorite. This is a very lightweight, fingering weight hat. It features a long section of ribbing at the beginning with a really cute contrast pop of color. It looks like it's a tubular cast on at the beginning with a contrast color used, which is amazing. Of course, this yarn is all about the colors. I saw it and just said, nope, yeah, I want exactly this hat and exactly these colors, and just went ahead and ordered her kits. One of the fun things about this pattern is it comes with a chart, but it does not come with the colors specified. So basically she wants you to pick and choose the colors and have fun with the colors. I was obsessed with the hat, so of course I just like blew up the picture really big and zoomed in and figured out which color was which and used them in exactly the same order she did. But it would be a fun opportunity to pick your own color schemes and your own ideas. And if you do love the colors as much as I do, often on the Tanis Fiber Arts website, they sell mini kits, and they have one that's called the Luminosity kit that matches this hat and their other sweater pattern. We have 2 honorable mentions. These are 2 crochet patterns that I fell in love with. They've been sitting in my favorites for quite a while. The first one up is the Krampus hat by Regina Wiess. This is so fun. It is so fun. It's like a giant goat head. Krampus, I don't know what Krampus is. He's a Christmas tradition somewhere in the world. Someone please tell me below a little bit more about that, because I can't really answer any of those questions. But this is a huge sort of goat head hat with horns and ears. And what I really like is that when I go into the project pages of other people, all of the projects look really, really good. So sometimes you can tell if a pattern is really written well or if it's kind of by looking at other people's patterns, because the people who take these professional photos for the patterns, they're pros at making things look good. And sometimes there's a little bit of trickery and there's a lot of costuming and other things going on to really help make a pattern look visually interesting. And then if you go to the other project pages, you see, this doesn't look quite as good as I thought. Not this pattern. just about every single project page I looked at looked very interesting and stunning and exciting, which tells me that this is probably a really well written pattern, and this is available for purchase through Ravelry. Last but not least, this is my last honorable mention. This is a favorite crochet pattern. This is the pattern that really made me want to learn how to crochet to start with. This is the dragon hat. Check this thing out. It's so cool. It looks like a little like dragon sitting on your head, or like an armored helmet of dragon. And of course the kid in the picture is adorable. This hat it's what made me want to learn how to crochet. It's just so cool. It's really, I don't think I would want to knit this. I think crochet is definitely the fiber skill for this style of shaping and detail and whimsy. It uses Red Heart yarn, which I think is a really good idea in this case. Red Heart, of course, is a very cheap, very hard-wearing utilitarian. I mean, you can't kill this yarn, but it also comes in like lots of really bright colors, and it's really good for these sort of children items, toys, stuffies, stuffed animals, things like that, things that are going to get lots of wear and tear and need to hold up for a long time. And this hat is definitely one of those things. The other great thing about this hat is that it is available in like 6 patterns. I think 6 patterns. Hold on, I'm looking at my computer here. Yeah, definitely like, oh gosh. they describe each of the languages in their own language. So I see some German, I see some French, I see some Spanish, some, oh, you know what? You guys are just going to have to go onto the project page and check it out yourself. So this is the dragon hat. It's by Joni Mehmet or Brie Abbey. And I don't know when they published this. 2014 is when this hit my favorites list here. Definitely. This is just the coolest thing I've ever seen. Okay, that is it for my top 10 plus 2 honorable mention favorite hat patterns. Let me know down below if you like this style of video. This is a new thing that I've been experimenting with, and I seem to be getting a lot of feedback that people are enjoying it. I try not to do only the newest, hottest stuff. I try to do a mix of newer and older patterns because there are so many great patterns out there that sometimes people forget about because there's always some new sparkly thing, right? There's the new sparkly squirrel that you're like, oh, I want to cast that on, which is why I tend to have so many whips and no finished objects. Speaking of whips, I've got updates for you. I'm so excited. Okay. Oh, this. You know what? Let me get the whole shebang. Okay, my viewers. I know I have been talking about this Orenburg worm shawl for a very long time, but I finally have some really good progress on it. And the more progress I make, the harder it is for me to show it to you. But let's first talk about what I got done. So the last time I spoke to you, I think I had about 2 or 2.5 of these long segments completed, and I now have all 4 done. So all 4 of those are done. After you complete each of these borders, let's see if you can see this one. There you go. So once all 4 of those borders are complete, your next step is to pick up and knit the bridges, which is here. So from the edge of your border, you pick up, you knit in the opposite direction. So you were knitting this way, now you're knitting this way. I hope this is helping you. And you knit a little transition called a bridge. And I'm told that the reason the bridges became a thing in this style of knitting is because of the increase in availability of knitting machines. So what would typically have been an all-over hand knit pattern, they were able to start cranking out the center pieces on knitting machines, which are often a little bit plainer and involve less shaping. So you would have hand knitters knitting parts of it, machine knitters knitting other parts of it, and then these bridges were used to join those sections together. So that's kind of how the bridge construction of this goes. And if you're having a hard time picturing the sort of construction and layout of this, so this is the border panel. You make 4 of them, and then you join them together to make a nice big square, and then you're actually going to knit in and fill in the center. So let me try to show you as much of that as I can. So I have all 4 bridges done. I have the center connected. Here we go. So there's no way we're going to be able to show you this very well. I'll just take some pictures and add them in here, but basically I have 3 of the 4 sections grafted together. So what you're looking at right here is the section where 2 of these border panels came together. Let's see. And then you graft them together along this seam right here. And this shawl uses a technique called a Russian graft or a Russian join, which I have never done before and is really ingenious. I'm not going to give all the secrets away because this is part of that interweave class on how to make the Orenburg warm shawls. After you graft them all together, you start knitting the center. You have about 14 repeats in the center. Thankfully, this center piece is much easier knitting than the borders are. Oh man, if you haven't seen the video yet over on Interweave Knits, Galina is from Russia and has a very strong Russian accent, and she says, borders. I'm never going to do any accent attempts ever again my entire time on this channel because that's not my strength. But every time I watch it, my husband is, sitting next to me and he's like kind of giggling every time she says borders, borders. Anyway, so you join all the borders together and then knit this all over simple lace section to fill in the gaps, and then I'm assuming there's going to be some sort of grafting or joining to add this last 4th border to the top of this whole pile. Unfortunately, the farther I get along with this, the harder it is for me to show it to you. So I will lay it out and try to take some pictures as best I can. Also, my cats have discovered that when I'm knitting right now, it means I have a giant pile of fluff in my lap. And so I have become the cat's favorite spot in the house. They all just sort of pile on whenever I am knitting. I do have a new cast on this week too, which I'm really excited about. So I know my Instagram feed has been filling up with all of the warm, snuggly knits for fall. But of course I live in a very warm tropical climate, so I'm still thinking about lightweight, hot weather clothing, and this week I cast on a pattern called Argyll. It's by Claire Lakewood and it's published in Pom Pom Quarterly and available for purchase through Ravelry. It doesn't look like much yet, does it? So I'm going to put up this picture. I hope you guys appreciate and love this pattern as much as I do. It's a simple striped tank top with a little tie in the front. I think it looks really cute and really feminine, and I am of course knitting it in random unnamed Japanese yarn. So this right here, this is UV cotton and it's looking a little bit neon in this light. We'll see if I can get some better pictures of it for you. It's definitely not as neon green as it's appearing here. This is one of those yarns that I purchased locally. I got this at a shop called Pandora House, and I have not been able to find it on Ravelry. So if you guys know of this yarn, this is UV cotton, which apparently has some sort of protection against UV rays in it. I am knitting the main body in this, and then this is the UV cotton lame, which is same thing but with just a little bit of sparkle added into the pattern. I'm pretty far off gauge with this. This is one of those patterns where I cast it on and I really like the drape and the feel of the gauge as it is, and I would have had to go up a needle size, a couple of needle sizes, I think, to meet gauge on this, which would have made this a very risque top. Basically, like, it's already kind of see-through. I think you can see that if I hold it up. And if I were to go up a couple of needle sizes, it would become very see-through. And the last thing you really want when you live in a very hot climate is to have to wear a tank top or a camisole or something underneath your shirt. This is kind of my problem with a lot of the like summer knits that are like lace all over and then you have to wear a tank top under them. So effectively you're wearing 2 layers. if you live in a place that's really hot, you know what I'm talking about. You're like, nah, one layer is too many layers as it is. So I'm having to kind of make some adjustments on the fly on this. This pattern is designed to be pretty cropped, but I don't wear cropped stuff. I'm a middle-aged woman at this point. I'm not rocking the crop tops. So I am adding some length to it, and the pattern gives some pretty good instructions about how to adjust for length. I admit that I don't really love knitting with cotton. It doesn't give me the same satisfaction as knitting with wool is. I think it's just not quite as stretchy and a little bit less comfortable on my hands to knit with. But I am very excited to have a lightweight summer something that I can wear this year. So that is everything that I have for knitting this week. I'm going to move on to the Life in Okinawa section. I'm not going to talk a lot before this Life in Okinawa section because I did record and talk quite a bit while I was out filming. Okinawa is long and thin, and we are going to be in the town of Kin, which is exactly halfway up the length of the island, but on the east coast. It is a very old town that's been on this island and well established for a long, long time. Let me just send you on over to future me. Past me? Yeah, let's just get started. So I'm stopping to film this separate from the temple site because of course it is a sacred site and I want to be as respectful as possible. I'm here on the streets of the town of Kin, just above the spring that has fed this village for ages. Let's talk about the Kinkannonji Temple. So let's break it down. Kin, of course, is the town of Kin. Konen means the compassionate Buddha. So this is the Buddha of compassion, and Ji means temple. So this is the town of Kin, the temple where the worship of the Buddha of compassion is found. And it's interesting because in many Asian cultures, the Konen Buddha is depicted as a woman, but if you move into areas like Tibet, the compassion Buddha is reincarnated as the Dalai Lama. So you may see male or female representations. In fact, a lot of the statues are shown as androgynous, just basically taking the emphasis away from gender. It doesn't really matter whether the gender is male or female. This temple has originally been here since the 1500s. Unfortunately, it burned down in the early 1930s. But the temple site is still intact, so all the trees that were planted here are original to the original construction. And thankfully, the reconstruction of the temple was completed before World War II and survived the Battle of Okinawa. It really is one of the very few sites here in Okinawa that survived any damage during the war. So it's a beautiful place to visit. When you first arrive, of course, you stop and pay your respects at the Buddhist temple. If you don't know, when you enter a Buddhist temple or shrine, you should always enter on the left or right side, not ever down the center of the pathway. If there's a torii gate present, then the gods will follow the torii gate and will walk in the center of the path, so you should walk to your side. After paying respects there, you can go to the left. There is a small gift shop where you can buy trinkets for good health, good travel. You can talk with the monks that live here in that area. And then, of course, if you go off to the right, you can descend down into one of Okinawa's many limestone caves. And inside, deep inside, in the dark with the spiders, is one of the many Shinto shrines in Okinawa. This is one of the sacred 8 shrines of Okinawa, and it is just a gorgeous sight. I can imagine that many people have sought shelter in those caves and have come to worship in those caves. And of interest, as you descend further and further down, you will eventually hit a gate. And this gate, actually on the other side of it, is where they are storing all of the awamori to age. So if you're a fan of awamori, which is a rice wine, the brand Dragon Awamori hails from this area of Okinawa, and a lot of their more expensive aged bottles are kept down in this site. In fact, it is a tradition that if you have a young family, you can have a dedication ceremony for your child and purchase a bottle of awamori, which will be kept there to age until the time your child comes of age. There is a little bit of an interesting history with this cave and the town. So originally, a Buddhist monk arrived on the islands and was said to have gone into the cave and battled with a giant habu snake, or some habu snakes that were terrorizing the community, and placed up this statue of Buddha, which has protected the cave ever since, and it has remained free of the poisonous snakes that are notorious to the island of Okinawa. As I've pointed out many times on my channel, you often find Buddhist and Shinto sites together, and that's not by mistake. Shinto and Buddhism were tightly intertwined and shared all of the same spaces for a long, long time. It wasn't until the Meiji period, which was the late 1800s, when the government of Japan set the state religion to Shintoism. They wanted to push out some of the Buddhist influences, which were seen as coming from outside or foreign influences. And as a result, it was mandated that Buddhist and Shinto sites be separated. So nowadays, you find the sites close together, if not exactly on top of each other. And here at this place, the Shinto shrine is down in the cave and the Buddhist temple is up on the grounds above the cave. Kin is a very old town, and the reason it's been around for as long as it has is its abundance of natural groundwater. So behind me are one of the natural springs that feeds into town, and this has been a historic site for years and years and years, a site of gathering fresh water and basically maintaining all of the necessities of living in a town. And I was surprised to find that when I got here, locals were actually still coming up to the site. I caught a man washing his feet and washing his hands and brushing his teeth. I found a group of kids stopping on the day to just cool off for a little bit. And it is a really cool and beautiful site.